City? See, tea. Now that you've given Anthony some tea.
Yes, let me give him some proverbs.
Yes, please.
Our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Republic of Liberia. One cannot be at the mouth of a river and use saliva to wash his hands.
One cannot be at the mouth of a river and use saliva to wash his hands. Anthony, what do you think the Liberians are telling us?
I think it's profound because it's almost like leaving value on the table. You remember there is a cartoon that came and there an African is sitting on a hut waiting for investors to come, and below the ground we have everything.
Yes.
Or a man who left his land to go look for gold, but the whole land underground was gold.
Yeah.
And in some cases it resonates with what we do. We have everything going for us in Kenya, but we leave the river and to saliva.
That's a good one.
All right.
Well said. Well said. Anthony, at the helm of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, I know that you and your team are really, really busy now looking at the finance bill, and that's why you're here this morning to tell us what you found in the finance bill. But let's track backwards, okay? We saw the growth of the manufacturing sector in the Kibaki years, towards the end of the Kibaki years, and also into some years of the Jubilee administration. Then we saw a decline of that growth. So that by the beginning of this administration, the contribution of manufacturing to GDP was about 7%?
7.2.
7.2%. And then there was this push and a conversation between Kenya Association of Manufacturers and others with the government and saying, let us now refocus our energies into growing this to 20% by 2030. The 20 by 30.
Yes.
Then we saw the National Treasury release the economic survey report the day before yesterday. And last year, what was the performance of the manufacturing sector?
So it climbed from 7.2% to 7.8%. We are waiting for the numbers. Now we think the growth was about 2.8%, which is marginal. We expected to grow by 3x, because if you look at from 7.8%, if you do a graph to 20%, we need to be growing by 3x every year to be able to reach the 20%. Yes.
So it performed below par.
Below, it's underwhelming.
All right.
Yes.
Now we have the finance bill, and this budget should basically be spurring economic growth and especially encouraging the manufacturing sector.
Yes.
So we can then hit this target of 20% by 2030. Have you seen that? If you look at the finance bill and if you look at, of course, the appropriations that are going into how much money is going to be spent in the manufacturing sector, what is the big picture?
I think, Eric, it's good to step back just a bit to 2023. And when the government came in 2022, back end of 2022, we were the second agency after NSC to meet with His Excellency the President. And we did this because we believe that this is a great opportunity for us. And we actually aligned sectors by sector, and we did a lot of analysis to go blow by blow and said, Your Excellency, if the interest for KK government is to create jobs, we know where the jobs are. And we went from textile sector, leather sector, pharma, plastics, construction, and we said, we have 1 million jobs. And it's not just about talking about 1 million jobs. We brought in the people who do the work. And we asked them 2 questions. One, there are many challenges that we face all the time. But this time, let us assume that you've been given all your wishes, been granted your wishes. Yeah. What do you see, both from the local, number one, market, and also international market? And we mapped out with our members, meticulously looking at the opportunities. And we came up with the Vision 20 by 30. So the Vision 20 by 30 is not picking the numbers from the air. It's actually work that we've seen. And we've said, look at the sectors that can give you 2x growth, 3x growth, 5x growth. If you look at the textile, for instance, and you look at global perspective, we are exporting apparels to the US, all right? And in 2022, 2023, the average number is about 550 million US dollars, right? While we are one of the big in Africa, that's about 60 billion. The global market is about $2.1 trillion, right? So we look at the pie, which is a global market, and the slice of the pie, and we wanted to use that so that it's very, very simple for people to understand. If you look at that, it's a 0.00000%. So the problem is not the market. The problem is not people to work, because you have so many people who need work. The problem is not space. The problem is that we're not organizing ourselves to be able to take advantage of that. And we have looked at now saying, let's scan the whole globe and see. We've opened the market. AGOA is coming to an end next year, but there is renewal. And the good thing is that the president is in the US, so some of the conversations will be AGOA extension by 16 years. We've seen that draft going to the Congress. But we've opened Kenya-EU Economic Partnership Agreement. Duty-free access, quota-free access for the next 25 years.
To the EU.
27 countries in the EU. $16 trillion economy. But what are we doing to position ourselves? And I'm asking that question in the context of that AGOA is, we have implemented AGOA for the last 24 years. Out of 6,000 tariff lines that we have access to the American market, we've only used 6.
Jesus.
Okay. Sorry, Anthony, but then I have to ask why. Because even as I look at this, and just in preparation for this discussion, I said, okay, let me look for one economy on the globe that has developed and has not used or has not had manufacturing as its anchor. And I couldn't find one. Every single developed economy on the globe today has manufacturing at its anchor. So if we know this and we've seen this, because we know that in order for your economy to thrive, you have to be operating in surplus. And in order to operate in surplus, that means you must have made something and sold it and made a profit, and then that keeps coming back into the country, right? So you've talked about this 0.00, I don't know, to the nth percent of what is happening vis-a-vis the opportunities that have been created. And the question is, why are we not taking advantage of these opportunities that are laid bare at our feet? Why?
It's exactly what City said. Sitting in the river.
Using saliva.
To
wash our face.
Because the opportunities are there. We are in a very unique position. Look at where we are. From the equator, we can generate green energy, and we are generating green energy. We are equidistant between the Far East and the Western Hemisphere. We are 8 hours from Europe, from London. We are 14 hours from New York. We are almost the same to China. The container will move from India or China to raw materials from China to Nairobi in about 1 week, 2 weeks. We can be able to deliver clothes to the west coast of the US in Los Angeles in 32 days. So, but the problem is, we cannot come together and say, what is our comparative advantage? And therefore, put our resources where our mouth is.
But when you say you cannot, who do you mean? You've already said that the Association of Manufacturers and the private sector had the second meeting the president had with various sectors was with the manufacturers. So you already came together and you together developed the Vision 20 by 30. So when you say we cannot come together, who are you talking about?
I think the policy making is, as they say, is a political process. Okay? And there are many political actors. There are many actors in the market, political markets, economic markets. And the vision of that's where the value is lost. We lose the value between the two. So what we say when we meet in the boardroom and what happens when we come up with a bill, and we'll come to this bill, a finance bill, it is underwhelming. Because it's not because of lack of information.
Right.
It is because of how the ogware works. The ogware is not working well. You know why? Because we have sat, if there is something that you've done over the last 2 years, is to sit with policymakers and technical people with the ministries, MITI, National Treasury, KRA, and crunch the numbers. Remember the Finance Act 2023. We were here with you. And I told you that there are proposals within that bill that will actually crumble some sectors. And I'll give you just 3 examples. Paper. And paper is not just paper. Paper is a big deal. Because anything that this is packaging is paper.
Yeah.
Right? The unga that we use is paper. The cooking oil that we use is paper. I mean, is packaging.
Paper.
So, but let's just focus on paper. So paper, we came and said, oh, someone is producing locally. And therefore, let us put what is called an ingenious way of taxing raw materials, export, promotion, and investment levy. But this export is not promote export. It's actually taxing the import of raw materials. And we put 10% and 35% duty and excise. And we did an analysis and we made it very known to the policymakers and say, look, we don't operate in a vacuum. Kenya operates within EAC Common External Tariff. Right? We have a common custom union. So whatever decision you make here, you have to be aware what others are doing. It's not like we are the only child in the family. We've opened our borders. We are also operating within COMESA. Right?
Yeah.
We are now breaking the walls to operate within AFCFTA, Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So whatever decision you make, you must have an eye on what all the others are doing.
Yep.
So what do? We are busy opening up, but when you come internally, we put levies like those ones I'm telling you, and therefore our products becomes expensive.
So what was that levy?
So that levy
was
export promotion.
Was imposed on any importation of raw material towards making of paper.
Paper,
right?
And packaging.
And
some certain grades
packaging
that are common.
So that we can promote local manufacturers who are using local raw materials.
Yes.
So how is that bad?
Ostensibly. Nobody, and I say nobody on some of those grades of paper does it in Africa. Forget about Kenya. Nobody does it in Africa. The unga paper that you see comes from virgin pulp, and we can never grow that tree because unless we import ice, those trees are grown in Scandinavian countries, and we're not going to grow it. So we gotta get to a point where we say, what is our comparative advantage?
So Anthony, what you're saying is, by just imposing that, you affected almost all paper manufacturers in Kenya.
The unga paper went up by 6 shillings. Because of someone alleging they can make and they can't. And we have a very well established system of verification, and we call it National Verification System, where we bring the ministry concerned, the technical ministry, that is the Ministry of Industry, National Treasury, KRA, KEBS, everybody, ourselves, and the people alleging. But we have even reports that saying you can't do it. Cement clinker, that's what happened. We had a report that said, don't do anything until back end of 2026. And we sat many times at the ministry. And we said, you are the PS for industry. You are the PS for investment. You want to impose a levy on clinker. You want to attract investment. You have a target of attracting $10 billion investment. And I went around the room and asked all the manufacturers of cement and said, how much are you going to invest in the next 2 years? We came up with a $1 billion investment. And therefore, and we have 2 PSs sitting and say, do you want to kill $1 billion investment because of this levy? And they chose to go with the levy, to kill.
So what's the impact of that in the last 1 year?
If you look at the report that was released the other day by KNBS, the government economic survey, you see that cement production went down by 100,000 metric tons.
Went down.
Down, production.
We're producing 100,000 metric tons less than we're producing before.
Yes.
In a year.
In a year. Now, let me just break that number for you so that you see the magnitude. 100,000 metric tons is 100 million kilos. It's 2 million bags of cement. It is 166,000 bags per month less. Why? You introduce a chokehold, unnecessary chokehold. So people cannot access raw materials. Someone would say, oh, there was dollar, it went up. But significantly, that levy of 17.5% is the one that caused all that problem.
Okay.
The same with steel.
Was there some positive? Was there more investment in clinker development?
You can't, because you've decimated the opportunity, because the capability for these companies to be able to go to the bank and borrow money, and this clinker, is not pocket change, it's a lot of money. You need to demonstrate to the bank that you are a viable going concern. Right. But before you do that, you have no access to raw materials. You can produce. So you can also invest backward. So we used to be exporters of steel. Now we are net importers of steel.
We used to be exporters of steel.
And we told the government, we said, look.
Wait. Yeah. We used to be exporters of steel.
Yes.
Steel manufactured here from our own ore.
Yes.
Into steel.
You see, this is a confusion that people get into.
Okay, yes.
Nobody does it 100% from end to end.
Okay.
The biggest trading component in the world, whether you're in America, you're in Russia, you're in China, is importation of raw materials or intermediate raw materials. You can never be 100% sufficient. So this is sometimes bundled in the conversation, and then you convolute the conversation.
But why are you not able to manufacture it from end to end?
Because for clinker, for instance, the license for limestone have not been issued for there is a moratorium.
Just because?
Yeah, the government has said there's a moratorium. You cannot mine limestone. So you don't have a license to mine limestone. So where are you going to get the clinker from?
Okay. And iron ore?
Iron ore, the same. There was a blanket moratorium for mining licenses in Kenya.
So when we were exporters of steel,
yes,
what was happening?
So what happens is that you import the raw materials, something called a billet. Billet is when you see a truck, on the road with
those long and the
billets. Once you bring it, then you add value. You have to get 100 products, from that, and you export those ones.
I see.
Now, if you look at the value chain between iron ore, billets to all the other products, this is one transformation and has about 1,000, 1,500 jobs. This one has over 100,000 jobs. So while you want to support this one, which we must, but it's not about imposing levies, because there are so many other incentives that you can give. And we support this investment. And we want all the other guys to come and also backward integrate.
So in the last year, what has happened to the steel industry?
So now we are getting the steels from East African countries.
We have stopped.
Because you see, the moment you...
What have the manufacturers done? They've stopped manufacturing?
You can't get access to the billet because you said you import 17.5% levy on import. Now you cannot import, all right?
Wait, so all these steel manufacturing companies that we see around here, are we saying that they're not doing any business?
They are doing minimal business, like this.
It's minimal.
Minimal.
Ish.
Yeah.
And it was growing previously. Before this 17%.
It had grown very fast because of some incentives that were given, but all of a sudden, with a strike of a pen,
we were promoting local industry.
Now, and we told the government, look, some of these policies are worse than zero-sum game. Because we are operating within EAC. If you make it difficult for me to import through the port of Mombasa, and I can import through the port of Dar es Salaam and still track the same good, now you have container loads every day coming with steel. The problem is that the same investors here are the same investors in Tanzania and same investors in Uganda. So what have they done? You depress your investment decision here, you invest more in Tanzania, and then you bring the finished product. So you can make a decision as if you are the only child in the house.
What? Anthony Mwangi, the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, is our guest this morning. The finance bill is out. So we've just been spending the first half hour looking at the impact of the Finance Act of 2023 and is giving us just those three examples, but also giving us the background of what is the manufacturing sector looking like right now. What is the idea and the ambition for the manufacturing sector is to contribute to the GDP by 20% by the year 2030. Last year, you contributed 9.2% or thereabouts to the GDP.
7.8%.
7.8%. 7.8%. Jesus. So let's talk about now the finance bill. What are the proposals here?
So
you want to start with the good news or the bad news?
No, I mean they're good
mix
news
them up. Okay.
because looking at now where we've come from, we spent inordinate amount of time just looking at how do we work together with government. How do we create a philosophy of growth? And we say, look, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's look at what the philosophy of EAC is from taxation point of view. And their four-band structure. It's a four-band structure. So if you do not have raw materials within EAC, then don't put levies, don't put taxes. Let us have zero taxation on those raw materials, because when you bring the raw materials, you put them in the factory for value addition, that's where the jobs are.
Yep.
Number two, if someone has that raw material but not in sufficient quantities, we'll actually propose that we add 10% duty to protect them. That's what we did for clinker, right? That's what we did for steel. That there is a duty, 10% duty, but we know you don't have enough. We know there is work to be done. You put 10% to allow these people to import, but nobody wants to import if it is you have that product here. 25% on intermediate products, raw materials. Even if they're available here and you impose 25%, you are sufficiently able to compete.
Yeah.
The last one is that 5% on finished goods. And we said, if we follow this structure, even when we're structuring our finance act, our finance bill, you'll allow Kenya to be competitive from production point of view and therefore create jobs. Then we went and said, okay, let's look at now the specifics. And the CS for industrialization, or MITI, formed a group, Kenya Business Reform Action Plan, where we sit and we say, look, we've talked about ease of doing business. Let's look at the cost of doing business. And we came out 4 costs, just to guide the process. Because the budget process is a long process. We started way back in September last year.
Yeah.
And we said 4 key costs. The cost of taxation, the cost of energy, the cost and tenure of capital, and the cost of or what you call regulatory costs, right? And said, let's work on a program where we propel way before you work on the finance bill. We escalate this all the way to the highest level so that they find their ways into the finance bill. Once we do this, we'll be able to produce.
Yeah.
Now, the bill comes out. And we're still discussing the same things we're discussing in 2023. Now, the export levy that was on 3 products, broad products, has now been extended to about 60 products.
What?
Okay? We were here talking about edible oil, right?
Yep.
And that's what we discussed last time.
Yes.
And I told you it's going to be a disaster. Because at that time, the government attempted to import finished goods. And we said, why would you do that? Now, if you go to ICD and some warehouses in Mombasa, they're still full of that oil. There's about 2 acres of oil in ICD, just packed. But that's a conversation for another day. Now, we're talking about impose of excise duty on the crude palm oil. We are talking about eco levy, which applies to almost all packaging materials. And that's why when we have done the calculation, that the cost of cooking oil will go up by about 80 to 100%.
Double.
Now, it's going to double, yes.
The cost of
Because you see what you've done,
Oil.
Cooking oil.
because what you've done is to add excise on the raw material.
Yeah.
Or, raw material is not just, the raw material, this intermediate raw material, that is a crude palm oil. And then you put excise, which you cannot recover when you sell your product. And there is one thing that policymakers, I think, may need to understand. and I'm not sure they understand it very well. You do not tax companies or products. The person who pays that tax is a consumer. So it doesn't matter. You can put 1,000%.
The end user is.
The end user has to pay.
Yeah.
But we worry as manufacturers about our competitiveness. Because remember, if we talked about cement, today you can bring a bag of cement from Egypt and sell it cheaper than you can get from here. And you've seen the cost, how the cost has escalated over the last 1 year. The cost has escalated from almost 500 shillings that has been stable for a long time to almost 850 in some places.
Per bag.
Per bag. The cost of construction has gone up by 40%. But you're saying, and we've cranked that data with KRA and the data is there. They said, if you're in a hole, stop digging. But you're still digging. So if you look at the whole of that bill and ask yourself, what is the theory of progress? And you need to see a golden thread, how that bill propels production.
Yeah.
This bill is actually inhibits production further.
If it is relatively easy to see that this then stifles production, that this then essentially stifles productivity and stifles development, then why would you go for something like that when an entire manufacturing, because this is not about manufacturers just being on the wailing end and saying that, you are actually making it difficult for us to do business, because like you said, raise it by 1,000%. The person who's going to suffer or the person who's going to pay for it is the consumer at the end of the line. And as the consumer, we're going to say, well, this is becoming too expensive. We're essentially going to either stop consuming, stop purchasing, and that puts the manufacturer back in the doldrums, right? So if this is so clear to be seen, we can see it, that it is clear that this is actually a stifler to development and production. Why would you go ahead with it?
I think is what I mentioned, that the policy making, because these are policy, is a political process. It's not economics. If you look at it, it's not just pure economics. It's political economy, right? But we understand where the government is attempting to deal with. And initially last year, they attempted to do the cost of cooking oil by bringing in cooking oil. It didn't work, right? Now the attempt to say, this $1.2 billion that we spent to bring in CPO, we're going to grow it ourselves. I say, okay, granted. Should we now sit down and work on a framework how that is going to work? Because you can give farmers sunflower seeds, 35 counties, 47 counties. What are they going to do with it?
Sure.
We still have poor people who are planting maize, and we don't have maize for milling. Everybody's planting maize, but they're still poor.
It's not enough.
So what makes the sunflower a magic crop? It's not going to happen, because you need production capacity. Someone comes and say, okay, can we bring our guys together so that we have people doing crude oil all over the country, and then you take the crude oil and say, look, it's not that simple. The capacity to do sunflower is there. Show us, where is the sunflower? We take over it 100%. But you see, that's not the conversation. The conversation is that you're going to have women group, doing cooking oil,
together
all
as
over.
cooperatives, and then
cooperatives are doing
counties
that.
offering
and then
seeds.
They do what with it?
So essentially, it really does look as though we can say that there's a desire for the manufacturing agenda to be at the very top of the priority list, but that's just in word. And it does look as though, again, unfortunately, there is a cabal. It could be a community of businesses or individuals then who will benefit directly. But across the board, if we look at development across the country, whereby we say sunflower, for example, do you have a capacity? Yes, there's a capacity. How is it going to work? Well, we're not really going to bother with that because the interest really is not there. We can say it, but we're not going to put in the necessary machinery to make sure that it actually works. So even when you have a bill like this, that it really is not for the benefit of the country at large.
What you say makes perfect sense, but consider if we were to use the word benefit, contextually, yeah? All the things that we say or we are informed were supposed to have been done, the lingering effect that we see has very little good in it. What you see is a situation that previously was thriving, taking a downward spiral. So if there was a benefit, it was like dew just before the sun comes up. One moment it's there, you see it, then the next moment it's actually not there.
But is somebody not benefiting? Somebody
Somebody
somewhere is benefiting. But what we're saying here is that the idea or the science behind having a finance bill or the science behind developmental production agenda is that for the country at large, across board, whether you have your small scale, middle scale, large scale production or manufacturers, to benefit across board. Even if you do want to collect taxes for the country then to move forward and do this through everybody at whatever level that they are at, being able to succeed.
You're actually
and to benefit.
right.
But that's not happening.
No, not happening. It is not going to happen.
That's exactly. So it's like it's pre-designed to fail, and we are sacrificing the development of a nation and its manufacturing capabilities on the altar of self-interest of a few.
I just wanted to follow that line of thought. And I believe that His Excellency the President means well, because, and I have said in Ghana, and actually when making my address, I said, Your Excellency, the value chain approach that you've taken in the plan was actually a masterstroke. And we actually ourselves looked at that approach. We came up with a fourth pillar called agriculture for industry. Because you cannot talk about agriculture without talking about agro-processing. So we said A for I, agriculture for industry. And it was purely to support and say, farmers are here, agro-processors are here, they don't know each other. The farmer is crying, start to plant with eyes closed, don't know who will buy the product. The agro-processor powers the factory in January, doesn't know whether they're going to get the raw materials. We are trying to bridge this gap. And I'll just give you a small example. On a small value chain called peanuts. And we say peanuts because they're just peanuts, right? Njugu. Peanuts.
Oh, okay.
Now, peanut processing is a big deal, right? It's a small value chain, but it's a big deal. We import peanuts for industrial processing from Malawi, Argentina, Brazil, India.
We import peanuts.
Peanuts.
For what?
Karanga. For peanut butter, and other products. Right?
Okay.
Now, this is 5 billion industry. But it's a small value chain, right? Malawi is a country of about a tenth of our GDP. But we buy 90% of our peanuts from there.
Wow.
Now, guess what? It's Kenyans who went and helped Malawi organize the value chain. So what have we done? We've said, if you go to Migori, you go to Homa Bay and go to other counties, and you visit someone, when you're leaving, they give you a gorogoro. They give you a gorogoro of peanuts.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
But yet we don't have peanuts for industrial production.
Because
we have not organized ourselves. The same thing. Now, what have we done? We have gone to Homa Bay and say, County of Homa Bay, Your Excellency the Governor, you're very progressive. We like the way you're working. Let us work together. Come to Camp Boardroom. We bring our members who are in this value chain. Let's debate together. Let's work on this small value chain.
Right.
As we're speaking now, we have farmers planting the right grade of peanuts in Homa Bay. And our members are going to offtake it 100%.
So they are like contract farming.
Contract farming. Right?
Right.
We organize that. And I just want to play back in sorghum. Sorghum is one of those forgotten crops. EABL came and organized that value chain.
Yeah.
The farmers who are doing sorghum today can go to the bank, borrow money because there is a contract.
Yeah.
And they are earning 3 billion shillings. So what is so different with sunflower? Because we actually have said, show us, where is this one sunflower? Show us. We're going to buy it 100%. But now, when you put these levies, it's not going to help anybody. Because before those local and small scale SMEs build the capacity, how long is that going to take?
So you need a number of years. Basically, you're saying, let's work X number of years ahead.
Yes.
And start now and say, by 2028, we'll start now increasing the levies because we have increased our local capacity.
Exactly. Now, what did Uganda do? Uganda, and sometimes we sit here in Kenya and think we are very strategic. But actually, we are losing that. Right. Uganda, a few years ago, they came to our members and said, you guys, you're processing cooking oil, come, we'll give you land. So one company went, got 30,000 acres of land for $1. $1.
Free.
Because they know the value. You're going to go deploy a lot of capital to plant palm oil and start processing. Very soon we start importing cooking palm oil from Uganda. Duty free, because you can impose duty on them. Now they've opened another 30,000 acres. So they're talking about 60,000 acres
of palm.
Tell me, where are you going to get that kind of land here? Yeah. And even if you plant palm oil today,
we have land.
Where is it?
There's a place called Galu, not very far away from
I mean, you can plant.
Galana Kulalu.
Yeah.
Galu.
Yeah, palm oil cannot grow in some of these ecological zones. So,
but in Homa Bay, if you organize the farmers, you can then get
now, which is a very different business model. Which farmer is going to wait for 7 years before they earn anything?
In this country,
because they want to change the ecosystem
with the school, because you want to make Kenya more competitive than Uganda.
We got to look at what we are competitive in.
So the taxes that have been proposed now in the current bill, how likely are they to further impact the manufacturing sector?
I mean, we're very, very clear, and in our initial statement, and we're going, and that bill is very, very complex. If you've looked at the bill, it's extremely complex. If you're not a tax expert, you're not a lawyer, you wouldn't understand anything in that bill. Other than the simple things people are talking about, the motor vehicle, Because you see this bill, the way it's crafted, they say this article amends an article in another law that amends another one in another law. So you have to have about 3 of them here.
All the laws there to see what's going on.
And it's very deliberate. It's not science. I mean, it's very deliberate. And that's why you get to Parliament, people have not seen it, have not say, how did you pass ETIMS? And I know you guys talked about ETIMS.
Yeah.
Inordinate, unintended consequences to small farmers. Anyhow, so we've looked at the basic one, the IDF.
Import
IDF
declaration.
That's import declaration, fee. The wisdom of even the previous government was, because and I know you don't want to go back to previous government because people get sensitive. The wisdom was differentiate IDF for raw materials, because you want to bring raw materials at competitive rate, and finished goods. But 2023 they bundle them together, the same. Import is import.
It's import.
Now what they've done is to move it from 2.5% to 3%. Again, makes us uncompetitive against our neighbors. Our neighbors don't have IDF, they don't have RDL.
Wow.
So in some of this grade, if you do computation, you put import duty, export levy,
railway development,
RDL, IDF, and others, you find that in some products, and we are competing within EAC, we are at 42%, everyone else is at 3, 4, 5%. So then you ask yourself, how are we losing? But
then, Anthony, as we conclude, you have sat, and you've told us, you've sat in a team organized by the Ministry of Industry.
Yes.
to look at what needs to be done to help this sector grow, and look at it from taxation, from regulatory framework. What do you need in terms of access to capital, cost of capital, all those things, so that you can take them to cabinet, and then cabinet will look at them and also influence what happens with this kind of bill. So, where is the breakdown in the chain?
It's actually a puzzle.
What you presented this? This is government saying, "Come, let's work together, so we do this," and then you see this. So how?
It's actually a puzzle because I've seen some of the proposals. So the budget process is very elaborate. So we call our members over a period of about 3 months. What do you think how we can grow this sector? How we can grow this sector? And then we go with these proposals to the Ministry of Industry. We sit down, we haggle, we argue, we come to a position. Once we come to a position, we go to the National Treasury.
Yeah.
Again, together. Remember, this time you're going together with the Ministry,
of Industry.
Because you're tied at the hip. We go to the National Treasury and say, look, National Treasury, this is how you're going to generate revenue. Once we align, the document then is transmitted to Parliament. But there's a few iterations there. Because remember, National Treasury is not a legal arm. So it has to go through the state law, government printer. By the time it gets out of the pipeline to go to Parliament for it to be a bill, it's a different document.
So the mongrel that comes out is not the mongrel that left the treasury?
No. And this is where the puzzle is. Now, the challenge is this. I'll give you an example.
In about 30 seconds.
Yeah. Diapers, we used to import all the diapers and sanitary wear. Pre-2015. Now we have created a local capacity. And we went and said, government, we want to show you how we can get 3 billion shillings from this sector. Instead of exempt status, put 3% VAT. Now what they did is say, oh my goodness, let's put eco levy on this. Now we go back to where we are because now people can import diapers from Egypt cheaper. It's underwhelming.
Goodness.
But what you agree at the ministry, what goes to the treasury, and you agree, and what ends up being published as a bill,
different.
They keep iterating.
Yeah.
It's
what Koreans will say, kisera sera.
Anthony Mwangi, CEO of Kenya Association of Manufacturers, has been our guest.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.